The Philippines, a land of smiles and happiness. When you enter this country, you can see smiles everywhere. People laugh, crack jokes, and look very happy. And a happy smile is an icon of this country. So why has a Japanese psychologist come all the way to the Philippines to teach positive psychology? Why teach happiness to people who are already be happy? Maybe it should be the other way around. Filipinos should go to Japan and teach Japanese people how to smile, diba? Let me share a little bit about myself. Why am I here teaching positive psychology? In 2011, a massive earthquake and tsunami struck northern Japan. I was working on the ground in the disaster relief for the victims. After that, I went to the US, finished my master's, then returned to Japan. But when I came back, I was lost. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I lost all sense of purpose and struggled to find direction. But on November 8th, 2013, I heard the news about Super Typhoon Yolanda that devastated the Philippines. It was one of the strongest typhoons ever recorded in world history. Over 8,000 lives are lost. Millions were displaced. It wasn't just a typhoon. It was catastrophe. Because of my relief work in Japan, a local NGO asked me to join their volunteer effort in Tacloban, the ground zero of the disaster. At that time, I had nothing to do, just struggling with myself, so why not? I flew to the Philippines, headed to Tacloban just a month after the typhoon. Quite simply, I hoped to help. But when I arrived in Tacloban, what surprised me was not the destruction of the towns. What surprised me was the people living there. Even with debris everywhere, homes destroyed, and no power available, people are smiling. They cracked jokes and laughed while clearing the rubble with their bare hands. As a serious Japanese guy, I was shocked. How could I smile in such a situation? I asked them, how can you smile? And they laughed, because we are Filipino. A what? And that night in a quiet tent, I heard the radio playing. Tindog Tacloban, Bangon Pilipinas, Pinoy tayo. Stand up Tacloban, rise up the Philippines. We are Filipinos, be strong. I was deeply moved how strong Filipinos are. And that moment sparked something in me, a new curiosity about human strength and resilience. Back in Japan, I started to study positive psychology, pursued a Ph.D., and started to work as a psychologist. So my life had found direction. I was doing something I loved, and I had purpose, but I always knew in the back of my mind that one day I would go back to the Philippines and give back. Then in 2022, as the pandemic eased, I learned that University of the Philippines, or UP Diliman, was looking for someone who could teach positive psychology. I thought, this is it. Now is the time. Living my stable life in Japan and starting over in the Philippines was risky, but my heart said go. So I applied and got accepted and moved to the Philippines to fulfill my sense of internal loob, a deep gratitude and obligation to give back. But once I started teaching at UP, one question kept playing my mind. Do Filipinos really need to learn positive psychology? I mean, they already smile and they're already strong. Do they really need this? Well, many of you may be familiar with positive psychology, but for those who aren't, positive psychology is a scientific study of what makes life worth living. While traditional psychology focuses on what's wrong with people like depression, anxiety, and trauma, positive psychology focuses on what's right with them, like strength, gratitude, and happiness. Imagine the garden. You can see the weeds and grass, and you can also see the flowers. If you're a gardener, you want to remove the weeds and plant flowers so that your garden can flourish. Likewise, traditional psychology is about removing the weeds, whereas positive psychology is about cultivating the flowers. Both are important, just different processes. But many people misunderstand positive psychology as blind optimism. Like, just ignore the weeds. Only look at the flowers. Think positively. It's not. So whenever I teach positive psychology, I always start with the opposite, negative emotions. Because negative emotions are important for survival. For example, fear can protect us from danger. Without fear, we cannot survive. So positive psychology doesn't ignore or dismiss the negative emotions. In fact, we also study the positive aspect or value of negative emotions. But too much negativity can, of course, lead to mental illness. So as a gardener, you need to manage these negative weeds. So for my course, I say to my student, let's study how we can grow and cultivate the flowers in life. But first, let us manage the weeds. So we spent one class exploring the value of negative emotion. And from then on, we spend our time studying the flowers for the entire course. My student looked happy, very engaged, and the class seems to be going well. But deep inside, I kept asking myself, is it really meaningful for them? Here's the Philippines. People are always smiling. What's the point of learning positive psychology here? There's so many flowers already. Honestly, I wasn't sure if my teaching had any real purpose here. My former colleagues and friends in Japan kept asking me, why are you teaching positive psychology in the Philippines? I couldn't answer. Toward the end of the course, I was preparing the question for their final reflection paper. Still unsure of myself and desperate for the answer to why I was teaching here, I decided to add one more question. How can positive psychology contribute to the Philippines in a meaningful way? It's a good question because it pushes my students to think about how to apply their learning for the society. But to be honest, more than anything else, I was the one craving that answer. How can positive psychology contribute to the Philippines? Now, over the last 3 years, I've taught more than 300 students in this course. And surprisingly, more than 85% of them gave me the same answer. Do you know what it was? What? Their answer was this. Yes, positive psychology can contribute to the Philippines because we need to learn the value of negative emotions. What? Negative emotions? Wait, that's not supposed to be the highlight. There was just one class at the very beginning of the course as an introduction. And yet, it has the biggest impact of them for the entire course. At first, I was shocked, a little bit sad, but as I read their reflections and discussed with them, it's all started to make sense. They said, since childhood at home and school, we were told, don't cry, always smile. We were told feeling sad or anxious is a sign of weakness or even lack of faith. So we hide our struggle because we don't want to be judged and we don't want to be a burden to others. Some even confessed, actually, I didn't know how to handle negative emotions. Have you ever felt the same way? These are some of the smartest and most brilliant students in the Philippines, so as a psychologist, I was shocked. But then the epiphany struck me. It's not that negative emotions are rare in the Philippines. It's that they're too often suppressed by the veneer of positivity. And then gradually, everything became clear to me as to why, despite all of the smiles, mental illness is the third most common disabilities in the Philippines, where around 2,000 lives were lost to suicide in just 6 months. And then I finally realized why, right after Typhoon Yolanda, there are so many smiles in the middle of devastation. Yes, their smiles were genuine. Yes, they're strong. But beneath those smiles was silent pain, quiet struggle, and the heart breaking without a sound. Maybe the real issue is, other than just hiding the pain behind a smile, we don't know how to face negative emotions because we are never given the chance to learn it in a healthy way. That's why after the course, many of my students appreciated learning about the value of negative emotions because it's the first time they realized negative emotions are not bad emotions. They started to listen to them, understand them so that they could manage them more wisely. And then I finally realized why I was here and why I am here today on this stage. According to Gallup, the Philippines ranks high in positive emotions. Yes, I do agree, but that doesn't mean negative emotions don't exist. Let me ask you this. Have you ever felt guilt in a relationship? Have you ever experienced loneliness? But have you ever appreciated guilt? Have you ever embraced loneliness? Because of that guilt, you apologize and you repair the relationship. And because of that loneliness, you reached out and you valued connection more. So guilt helps us repair, and loneliness shows us the need for connection. Yes, of course, we don't want to feel negative emotions. They feel unpleasant. But unpleasant doesn't mean useless. In fact, they have value. They guide us toward what truly matters. Returning to the garden analogy, yes, we all want flowers in life. But ironically, without weeds, our garden cannot flourish. And as the saying goes, weeds are flowers too, once we get to know them. So our task is not to avoid them, but to understand them. Embrace them because negative emotion is not our enemies. They are messengers sent to help us. So next time you feel a negative emotions, a weed in your garden, don't step on it. Don't bury it under your smile. Instead, take a deep breath and ask yourself, why am I feeling this emotion? Why I'm feeling sad? Why I'm feeling jealous? Why I'm feeling frustrated? And then ask yourself, what is the message here? When you choose to listen, emotion speaks loudly. They tell you what you need to know and what truly matters. And with that guidance, you can cultivate your life in a healthy way. So if there's one thing you remember from this talk, I hope it's this. There are no good or bad emotions. Every emotion has a purpose. Each one carries a message. When we embrace all emotions, whether positive or negative, that is when our inner garden can begin to thrive. And that is when we can truly smile. Thank you. Mabuhay.